SelfInquiry. For the subsidence of the mind, there is no other means more effective than self-inquiry. Even though the mind subsides by other means, that is only apparently so. It will rise again. This is the direct method. All other methods are practiced while retaining the ego, and therefore many doubts arise and the ultimate question still remains to be tackled in the end. But in this method, the final question is the only one, and is raised from the very beginning. Self-inquiry leads directly to self-realization by removing the obstacles which make you think that the self is not already realized. Meditation requires an object to meditate on, whereas in self-inquiry, there is only the subject and no object. That is the difference between them. Why should self-inquiry alone be considered the direct path to realization? Because every kind of path except self-inquiry presupposes the retention of the mind as the instrument for following it, and cannot be followed without the mind. The ego may take different and more subtle forms at different stages of one's practice, but it is never destroyed. The attempt to destroy the ego or the mind by methods other than self-inquiry is like a thief turning policeman to catch the thief that is himself. Self-inquiry alone can reveal the truth that neither the ego nor the mind really exists and enable one to realize the pure, undifferentiated being of the self or the absolute. To ask the mind to kill the mind is like making the thief the policeman. He will go with you and pretend to catch the thief, but nothing will be gained. So you must turn inward and see where the mind rises from, and then it will cease to exist. Isn't asking the mind to turn inward and seek its source also employing the mind? Of course, we are employing the mind. It is well known and admitted that only with the help of the mind can the mind be killed. But instead of setting about saying there is a mind and I want to kill it, you begin to seek its source, and then you find it does not exist at all. The mind turned outwards results in thoughts and objects. Turned inwards, it becomes itself, the self. By steady and continuous investigation into the nature of the mind is transformed into that which I refers, and that is in fact the self. The mind has necessarily to depend for its existence on something gross. It never subsists by itself. It is the mind that is otherwise called the subtle body, ego, jiva, or soul. That which rises in the physical body as I is the mind. If one inquires whence the I thought arises in the body, in the first instance, it will be found that it is from the hridayam or the heart. That is the source and stay of the mind. Or again, even if one merely continuously repeats to oneself inwardly, I, with the entire mind fixed thereon, that also leads to the same source. The first and foremost of all thoughts that arise in the mind is the primal I thought. It is only after the rise or origin of the I thought that innumerable other thoughts arise. In other words, only after the first personal pronoun, I, has arisen, do the second and third personal pronouns, you, he, etc., occur to the mind, and they cannot subsist without it. Since every other thought can occur only after the rise of the I thought, And since the mind is nothing but a bundle of thoughts, it is only through the inquiry, who am I, that the mind subsides. Moreover, the integral I thought implicit in such inquiry, having destroyed all other thoughts, itself finally gets destroyed or consumed, just as a stick used for stirring the burning funeral pyre gets consumed. When the mind or ego has to be discarded in any case, why waste time analyzing it? To inquire, who am I that am in bondage, and thus know one's real nature, is the only liberation. To keep the mind constantly turned inwards and to abide thus in the self is the only self-inquiry. Just as it is futile to examine the rubbish that has to be swept up only to be thrown away, so it is futile for him who seeks to know the self to set to work enumerating the tattvas that envelop the self and examining them instead of casting them away. He should consider the phenomenal world with reverence to himself as merely a dream. Other thoughts arise more forcibly when one attempts meditation. Yes, all kinds of thoughts arise in meditation. That is only right, for what lies hidden in you is brought out. Unless it rises up, how can it be destroyed? Thoughts rise up spontaneously, but only to be extinguished in due course, thus strengthening the mind. When I concentrate, all sorts of thoughts arise and disturb me. The more I try, the more thoughts rise up. What should I do? Yes, that will happen. All that is inside will try to come out. There is no other way except to pull the mind up each time it wants to go astray and fix it in the self. Bhagavan has often said that one must reject other thoughts when one begins the quest. But thoughts are endless. If one thought is rejected, another comes up and there seems to be no end of it all. I do not say that you must keep on rejecting thoughts. If you cling to yourself, to the I thought, and your interest keeps you to that single thought, other thoughts will get rejected and will automatically vanish. When I think, who am I? The answer comes, I am not this mortal body, but am consciousness of the self. And then another thought suddenly rises. Why has the self become manifest? In other words, why has God created the world? The inquiry, who am I, really means trying to find the source of the ego or of the I thought. You are not to occupy the mind with other thoughts such as, I am not the body. Seeking the source of the I serves as a means of getting rid of all other thoughts. You should not allow any scope for other thoughts such as you mention, but should keep the attention fixed on finding the source of the I thought by asking, when any other thought arises, to whom it occurs. And if the answer is to me, you then resume the thought. What is this I? What is its source? Who am I? How is the answer to be found? Ask yourself the question. The body and its functions are not I. Going deeper, the mind and its functions are not I. The next step takes one to the question, wherefrom do these thoughts arise? The thoughts may be spontaneous, superficial, or analytical. They operate in the mind. Then, who is aware of them? The existence of thoughts, their clear conception and operation become evident to the individual. This analysis leads to the conclusion that the individuality is operative as the cognizer of the existence of thoughts and their sequence. This individuality is the ego, or as people say, I. Intellect is only the sheath of the I, and not the I itself. Inquiring further, the questions arise. What is this I? Wherefrom does it come? I was not aware in sleep. Simultaneously with its rise, sleep changes to dream and wakefulness. But I am not concerned with the dream state just now. Who am I now in the wakeful state? If I originated on waking from sleep, then the I was covered up with ignorance. Such an ignorant I cannot be what the scriptures refer to or the wise affirm. I am beyond even sleep. I must be here and now, and must be what I was all along in sleep and dream also, unaffected by the qualities of these states. I must therefore be the unqualified substratum underlying these three states. Bhagavan, we have been spiritually inclined from childhood. We have read several books on philosophy and are attracted by Vedanta. So we read the Upanishads, Yoga Visishta, Bhagavad Gita, etc. We try to meditate, but there is no progress in our meditation. We do not understand how to realize. Can you help us towards realization? How do you meditate? I begin by asking myself, who am I, and eliminate the body as not I, the breath is not I, the mind is not I, but then I am unable to proceed further. Well, that is all right so far as the mind goes. Your process is only mental. Actually, all the scriptures mention this process only in order to guide the seeker to the truth. The truth cannot be directly indicated. That is why this mental process is used. You see, he who eliminates all the not I cannot eliminate the I. In order to be able to say, I am not this or I am that, there must be the I to say it. This I is only the ego, or the I thought. After the rising up of this I thought, all other thoughts arise. The I thought is therefore the root thought. If the root is pulled out, all the rest is uprooted at the same time. Therefore seek the root I. Question yourself. Who am I? Find out the source of the I. Then all these problems will vanish and the pure self alone will remain. But how am I to do it? The I is always there, whether in deep sleep, in dream, or in the waking state. The one who sleeps is the same as the one who is now speaking. There is always the feeling of I. If it were not so, you would have to deny your own existence. But you do not. You say, I am. Find out who is. I still do not understand. You say the I is now the false I. How am I to eliminate this wrong I? You need not eliminate any false I. How can I eliminate itself? All that you need do is to find out its origin and stay there. Your effort can extend only so far. Then the beyond will take care of itself. You are helpless there. No effort can reach it. If I am always here and now, why do I not feel so? Who says that you do not? Does the real I or the false I? Ask yourself, and you will find that it is the false I. The false I is the obstruction which has to be removed in order that the true I may cease to be hidden. The feeling I have not realized is the obstruction to realization. In fact, it is already realized. There is nothing more to be realized. If there were, realization would be something new which did not yet exist. It was to come about in the future. But whatever is born will also die. If realization is not eternal, it is not worth having. Therefore, what we seek is not something that must begin to exist, but only that which is eternal, but is veiled from us by obstructions. All that we need do is to remove the obstruction. What is eternal is not recognized as such, owing to ignorance. Ignorance is the obstruction. Get rid of it, and all will be well. This ignorance is identical with the I thought. Find its source, and it will vanish. The I thought is like a spirit which, although not palpable, rises up simultaneously with the body, flourishes with it, and disappears with it. The body consciousness is the wrong I. Give it up. You can do so by seeking the source of I. The body does not say, I am. It is you who say, I am the body. Find out who this I is. Seek its source, and it will vanish. Then will there be bliss? Bliss is coeval with being consciousness. All the arguments relating to the eternal being apply to eternal bliss also. Your nature is bliss. Ignorance is now hiding the bliss, but you have only to remove the ignorance for the bliss to be freed. Should we not find out the ultimate reality of the world as individual and God? These are conceptions of the I. They arise only after the advent of the I thought. Did you think of them in deep sleep? Yet you existed in sleep, and the same you is speaking now. If they were real, would they not exist in your sleep also? They are dependent on the I thought. Again, does the world tell you, I am the world? Does the body say, I am the body? You say, this is the world, this is the body, and so on. So these are only your own conceptions. Find out who you are, and that will be the end of all doubts. What becomes of the body after realization? Does it continue to exist or not? We see realized people performing actions like other people. This question need not worry you now. You can ask it after realization if you feel like. As for realized beings, let them take care of themselves. Why do you worry about them? In fact, after realization, neither the body nor anything else will appear different from the self. If we are always being consciousness bliss, why does God place us in difficulties? Why did He create us? Does God come and tell you that He placed you in difficulties? It is you who say so. It is the false I again. If that disappears, there will be no one to say that God created this or that. That which is does not even say, I am. For does any doubt arise that I am not? Only if a doubt arose whether one was a cow or a buffalo, would one have to remind oneself that one is not an animal, but a man. But this never happens. It is the same with one's own existence and realization. When the mind unceasingly investigates its own nature, it transpires that there is no such thing as the mind. This is the direct path for all. The mind is merely thoughts. Of all thoughts, the thought I is the root. Therefore the mind is only the I thought. Whence does this I thought arise? Seek for it within. It then vanishes. This is the pursuit of wisdom. Where the I vanishes, there appears an I by itself. This is the infinite Purnam. If the ego is, everything else is also. If the ego is not, nothing else is. Indeed, the ego is all. Therefore, the inquiry as to what this ego is the only way of giving up everything. The state of non-emergence of I is the state of being that. Without questing for that state of non-emergence of I and attaining it, how can one accomplish one's own extinction, from which the I does not revive? Without that attainment, how is it possible to abide in one's true state, where one is that? Just as a man would dive in order to get something that had fallen into the water, so one should dive into oneself with a keen, one-pointed mind, controlling speech and breath, and find the place whence the I originates. The only inquiry leading to self-realization is seeking the source of the word I. Meditation on I am not this, I am that may be an aid to inquiry, but it cannot be the inquiry. If one inquires, who am I? Within the mind, the individual I falls down abashed as soon as one reaches the heart, and immediately reality manifests itself spontaneously as I. Although it reveals itself as I, it is not the ego but the perfect being, the absolute self. The notions of bondage and liberation are merely modifications of the mind. They have no reality in their own, and therefore cannot function of their own accord. Since they are modifications of something else, there must be an entity independent of them as their common source and support. If, therefore, one investigates into that source in order to know of whom the bondage or liberation is predicated, one will find that they are predicated of me, that is, oneself. If one then earnestly inquires, who am I? One will see that there is no such thing as I or me. That which remains on seeing that the I does not exist is realized vividly and unmistakably as self-luminous and subsisting merely as itself. This vivid realization as a direct and immediate experience of the supreme truth comes quite naturally, with nothing uncommon about it, to everyone who, remaining just as he is, inquires introspectively without allowing the mind to become externalized, even for a moment, or wasting time in mere talk. There is therefore not the least doubt regarding the well-established conclusion that to those who have attained this realization and thus abide absolutely identical with the self, there is neither bondage nor liberation. The self is pure consciousness. Yet a man identifies himself with the body which is insentient, and does not itself say, I am the body. Someone else says so. The unlimited self does not. Who does? A spurious I arises between the pure consciousness and the insentient body and imagines itself to be limited to the body. Seek this, and it will vanish like a phantom. The phantom is the ego or mind or individuality. All the scriptures are based on the rise of this phantom, whose elimination is their purpose. The present state is mere illusion. Its dissolution is the goal and nothing else. How is one to realize the self? Whose self? Find out. Mine, but who am I? It is you who must find out. I don't know. Just think over the question. Who is it that says, I don't know? Who is the I in your statement? What is not known? Somebody or something in me. Who is that somebody? In whom? Perhaps some power? Find out. Why was I born? Who was born? The answer is the same to all your questions. Who am I then? Have you come to examine me? You must say who you are. However much I try, I do not seem to catch the I. It is not even clearly discernible. Who is it that says the I is not discernible? Are there two I's in you? That one is not discernible to the other? Instead of inquiring, who am I, can I put the question to myself, who are you? So that my mind may be fixed on you, whom I consider to be God, in the form of the Guru? Perhaps I would come nearer to the goal of my quest by that inquiry than by asking myself, who am I? Whatever form your inquiry may take, you must finally come to the one I, the self. All these distinctions made between I and you, master and disciple, are merely a sign of ignorance. The supreme I alone is. To think otherwise is to delude oneself. Therefore, since your aim is to transcend here and now, these superficialities of physical existence through self-inquiry, where is the scope for making the distinctions of you and I, which pertain only to the body? When you turn the mind inwards, seeking the source of thought, where is the you and where is the I? You should seek and be the self that includes all. But isn't it funny that the I should be searching for the I? Doesn't the inquiry, who am I, turn out in the end to be an empty formula? Or am I to put the question to myself endlessly, repeating it like some mantra? Self-inquiry is certainly not an empty formula. It is more than the repetition of any mantra. If the inquiry, who am I, were mere mental questioning, it would not be of much value. The very purpose of self-inquiry is to focus the entire mind at its source. It is not, therefore, a case of one I searching for another I. Much less is self-inquiry an empty formula, for it involves an intense activity of the entire mind to keep it steadily poised in pure self-awareness. Self-inquiry is the one infallible means, the only direct one, to realize the unconditioned absolute being that you really are. I am told that according to your school, I must find out the source of my thought. How am I to do that? I have no school. However, it is true that one should trace the source of all thoughts. Suppose I have the thought horse and try to trace its source. I find that it is due to memory, and the memory in its turn is due to prior perception of the object horse, but that is all. Who asked you to think about all that? All those are also thoughts. What good will it do you to go on thinking about memory and perception? It will be endless, like the old dispute. Which came first, the tree or the seed? Ask, who has this perception and memory? That I that has the perception and memory? Whence does it arise? Find this out. Because perception or memory or any other experience only comes to that I. You do not have such experiences during sleep, and yet you say that you existed during sleep, and you exist now, too. That shows that the I continues while other things come and go. I'm asked to find out the source of I, and in fact that is what I want to find out, but how can I? What is the source from which I came? You came from the same source in which you were during sleep. Only during sleep you could not know where you entered. That is why you must make the inquiry while awake. Some of us advise the visitor to read Who Am I and Ramana Gita, and Bhagavan also told him he might do so. Your books prescribe self-inquiry, but how is one to do it? That must also be prescribed in the books. Am I to concentrate on the thought, who am I? It means that you must concentrate to see where the I thought arises. Instead of looking outwards, look inwards and see where the I thought arises. And Bhagavan says that if I see that, I shall realize the self. There is no such thing as realizing the self. How is one to realize or make real what is real? People all realize or regard as real what is unreal, and all they have to do is to give up doing so. When you do that, you will remain as you always are, and the real will be real. It is only to help people give up regarding the unreal as real that all the religions and practices taught by them have come into being. Whence comes birth? Whose birth? The Upanishads say, he who knows Brahman becomes Brahman. It is not a matter of becoming, but of being. There is no goal to be reached. There is nothing to be attained. You are the self. You exist always. Nothing more can be predicated of the self than that it exists. Seeing God or the self is only being the self. That is yourself. Seeing is being. You, being the self, want to know how to attain the self. It is like a man being at Ramana Ashram and asking how many ways there are of going to Ramana Ashram, and which is the best way for him. All that is required of you is to give up the thought that you are this body, and give up all thoughts of external things or the non-self. As often as the mind goes out towards objects, stop it and fix it in the self or I. That is all the effort required on your part. Ceaseless practice is essential until one attains without the least effort that natural and primal state of mind which is free from thought. In other words, until the I, my, and mine are completely eradicated and destroyed. How can one know the self? The self always is. There is no knowing it. It is not some new knowledge to be acquired. What is new and not here and now cannot be permanent. The self always is, but knowledge of it is obstructed, and the obstruction is called ignorance. Remove the ignorance, and knowledge shines forth. In fact, it is not the self that has this ignorance or even knowledge. These are only accretions to be cleared away. That is why the self is said to be beyond knowledge and ignorance. It remains as it naturally is. That is all. How to control the wandering mind? It troubles me. I don't know how to do it. That is nothing particular to you. That is what everybody asks and what is dealt with by all the scriptures, such as the Gita. What other way is there except to draw the mind back every time it strays or turns outwards, as advised in the Gita? Of course, it is not an easy thing to do. It will come only with practice. The mind strays after what it desires. It won't stay fixed on the object I set before it. Everybody seeks only what brings him happiness. Your mind wanders out after some object or other because you think that happiness comes from it. But find out where all happiness comes from, including that which you regard as coming from sense objects. You will find that it all comes from the self alone. And then you will be able to abide in the self. It's very difficult to stop the thoughts. All doubts will cease only when the doubter and his source have been found. It is no use endlessly removing doubts. If we clear up one, another will arise, and there will be no end to them. But if the doubter himself is found to be really non-existent by seeking his source, then all doubts will cease. So is the I thought a thought, and do we concentrate on thinking the I? Concentration is not thinking of one thing. On the contrary, it is excluding all thoughts. Since all thoughts obstruct the sense of one's true being, all efforts are to be directed simply to removing the veil of ignorance. Concentrating the mind solely on the self will lead to happiness or bliss. Drawing in the thoughts, restraining them, and preventing them from straying outwards is called detachment. Vairagya, fixing them in the self, is spiritual practice, sadhana. Concentrating on the heart is the same as concentrating on the self. Heart is another name for self. It is stated in any book that for ultimate and final realization one must ultimately come to the heart, even after reaching the Sahasrara, the thousand-petal lotus, the center and the crown of the head, and that the heart is at the right side? No, I have not come across this in any book, although in a Malayalam book on medicine I came across a stanza locating the heart on the right side, and I have translated it into Tamil in the supplement to the 40 verses. We know nothing about the other centers. We cannot be sure what we arrive at by concentrating on them and realizing them. But as the I arises from the heart, it must sink back and merge there for self-realization. Anyway, that has been my experience. Know that the pure and changeless self-awareness in the heart is the knowledge which, through destruction of the ego, bestows liberation. The body is inert like an earthen pot, since it has no I consciousness, and since in deep sleep when bodiless, we experience our natural being, the body cannot be the I. Who then is it that causes I-ness? Where is he? in the heart cave of those who thus inquire and who know and abide as the Self, Lord Arunachala Siva shines forth as himself, as that am I consciousness. Bhagavan was saying that the heart is the center of the self. Yes, it is the one supreme center of the self. You need have no doubts about that. The real self is there, in the heart, behind the ego self. Will Bhagavan please tell me where in the body it is? You cannot know it with your mind or picture it with your imagination, although I tell you that it is here on the right side of the chest. The only direct way to realize it is to stop imagining and try to be yourself. Then you automatically feel that the center is there. It is the center spoken of in the scriptures as the heart cavity. Can I be sure that the ancients meant this center by the term heart? Yes, you can, but you should try to have the experience rather than locate it. A man does not have to go and find where his eyes are in order to see. The heart is there, always open to you, if you care to enter it, always supporting your movements, although you may be unaware of it. It is perhaps more correct to say that the self is the heart. Really, the self is the center and is everywhere aware of itself as the heart or self-awareness. When Bhagavan says that the heart is the supreme center of the spirit or the self, does that imply that it is not one of the 6 yogic centers, chakras? The yogic centers, counting from the bottom upwards, are a series of centers in the nervous system. They represent various stages, each having its own kind of power or knowledge, leading to Sahasrara, the 1,000-petal lotus in the brain, where is seated the supreme Shakti power. But the self that supports the whole movement of the Shakti is not located there, but supports it from the heart center. Then it is different from the manifestations of Shakti? Really, there is no manifestation of Shakti apart from the self. The self became all these Shaktis. When the yogi attains the highest state of spiritual awareness, samadhi, it is the self in the heart that supports him in that state whether he is aware of it or not. But if his awareness is centered in the heart, he realizes that whatever centers or states he may be in, he is always the same truth, the same heart, the one self, the spirit that is present throughout, eternal and immutable. The Tantra Sastra calls the heart Surya Mandala, or the solar orb, and the Sahasrara as Chandra Mandala, or lunar orb. This shows the relative importance of the two. If the eye is an illusion, who is it that cast off the illusion? The eye cast off the illusion of the eye and yet remains I. Such is the paradox of self-realization. The realized do not see any paradox in it. Consider the case of the worshipper. He approaches God and prays to be absorbed in Him. He then surrenders himself in faith and by concentration. And what remains afterwards? In the place of the original I, self-surrender leaves a residuum of God in which the I is lost. That is the highest form of devotion or surrender and the peak of detachment. You may give up this and that of my possessions, but if instead you give up I and mine, all is given up at a stroke, and the very seed of possession is destroyed. Thus the evil is nipped in the bud or crushed in the germ. But detachment must be very strong to do this. The craving to do it must equal the craving of a man who is held under water to rise to the surface and breathe. I sometimes find myself when doing self-inquiry that I get very sleepy, but when I stop meditating, it goes away. What is required is to remain fixed in the self always. The obstacles to that are distraction by things of the world, including sense objects, desires, and tendencies, on the one hand, and sleep on the other. Sleep is always mentioned in the books as the first obstacle to samadhi, and various methods are prescribed for overcoming it according to the stage of evolution of the person concerned. First, one is enjoined to give up all worldly distractions and to restrict sleep. But then, it is said, for instance, in the Gita, that one need not give up sleep entirely. One should not sleep at all during daytime, and even during night restrict sleep to the middle portion from about 10 to 2. But another method that is prescribed is not to bother about sleep at all. Whenever it overtakes you, you can do nothing about it. So simply remain fixed in the self or in meditation every moment of your waking life, and take up meditation again the moment you wake, and that will be enough. Then, even during sleep, the same current of thought or meditation will be working. This is evident because if a man goes to sleep with any strong thought working in his mind, he finds the same thought present when he wakes up. It is of the man who does this with meditation that it is said that even his sleep is samadhi. When I reach the thoughtless stage in my sadhana, I enjoy a certain pleasure, but sometimes I also experience a vague fear which I cannot properly describe. Whatever the experience, you should never rest content with it. Whether you feel pleasure or fear, ask yourself, who feels it? And continue your efforts until both pleasure and fear are transcended and all duality ceases and the reality alone remains. There is nothing wrong in such things being experienced, but you must never stop at that. For instance, you must never rest content with the pleasure of laya, dissolution, experienced when thought is quelled, but must press on until all duality ceases. How am I to search for the I from start to finish? When I meditate, I reach a stage where there is a vacuum or void. How should I proceed from there? Never mind whether there are visions or sounds or anything else, or whether there is void. Are you present during all of these, or are you not? You must have been there during the void to be able to say that you experienced a void. To be fixed in that you is the quest from start to finish. In all books on Vedanta, you will find this question of a void or nothing being left raised by the disciple and answered by the guru. It is the mind that sees objects and has experiences, and that finds a void when it ceases to see and experience. But that is not you. You are the constant illumination that lights up both the experience and the void. It is like the theater light that enables you to see the theater, the actors, and the play, while the play is going on, but also remains a light and enables you to say that there is no play on when it is all finished. Or there is another illustration. We see objects all around us, but in complete darkness. We do not see them and say, I see nothing. In the same way, you are there even in the void you mention. You are the witness of the three bodies, the gross, the subtle, the causal, and of three times, past, present, and future, and also this void. In the story of the 10th man, when each of them counted and thought there were only 9, each one forgetting to count himself, there is a stage when they think one is missing and do not know who it is, and that corresponds to the void. We are so accustomed to the notion that all that we see around us is permanent and that we are this body, that when all this ceases to exist, we imagine and fear that we also have ceased to exist. A disciple said in the Vivekachudamani, "After I eliminate the 5 Cs as not self, I find that nothing at all remains." And the Guru replies that the self, or that by which all modifications, including the ego and all its creatures in their absence, that is the void, are perceived, is always there. The nature of the self or I must be illumination. You perceive all modifications and their absence. How? To say that you get the illumination from another would raise the question how he got it, and there would be no end to the chain of reasoning. So you, yourself, are the illumination. The usual illustration of this is the following. You make all kinds of sweets of various ingredients and in various shapes, and they all taste sweet because there is sugar in all of them, and sweetness is the nature of sugar. And in the same way, all experiences and the absence of them contain the illumination, which is the nature of the self. Without the self, they cannot be experienced, just as without sugar, not one of the articles you make can taste sweet. First, one sees the self as objects. Then one sees the self as void. Then one sees the self as the self. Only in this last case there is no seeing, because seeing is being. Is it right to kill animals such as tigers and deers and so on and use the skin as a seat for the yoga posture? The mind is the tiger or the deer. If everything is illusion, one can then take life? But who has the illusion? That is what you must find out. In fact, everyone is a killer of the self, Atmahan, at every moment of his life. Which posture is best? Any posture, possibly Sukhasana, the easy or half Buddha posture, but that is immaterial for Jnana, the path of knowledge. Does posture indicate temperament? Yes. What are the properties and effects of a tiger's skin or wool or a deer's skin as a seat? Some people have found out and described them in books on yoga. They correspond to conductors and non-conductors of magnetism and so on. But all this is of no importance on the path of knowledge, Jnana Marga. Posture really means steadfastness in the self, and it is inward. Which is the most suitable time for meditation? What is time? Tell me what it is. Time is only an idea. There is only reality. Whatever you think it is, it appears to be. If you call it time, it is time. If you call it existence, it is existence, and so on. After calling it time, you divide it into days and nights, months, years, hours, minutes, and so on. Time is immaterial for the path of knowledge, but some of these rules and disciplines are good for beginners. Does Bhagavan recommend any special posture for Europeans? It depends on the mental equipment of the individual. There are no hard and fast rules. Is meditation to be practiced with eyes open or closed? It may be done either way. The important thing is that the mind should be turned inwards and kept active in its quest. Sometimes it happens that when the eyes are closed, latent thoughts rush forth with great vigor. But on the other hand, it may be difficult to turn the mind inwards with the eyes open. It requires strength of mind. The mind is pure by nature, but contaminated by taking in objects. The great thing is to keep it active in its quest without taking in external impressions or thinking of other things. It is said in some books that one should cultivate all the good or divine qualities in order to prepare oneself for self-realization. All good or divine qualities are included in spiritual knowledge, and all bad or demonic qualities are included in ignorance. When knowledge comes, ignorance goes, and all the divine qualities appear automatically. If a man is self-realized, he cannot tell a lie or commit a sin or do anything wrong. It is no doubt said in some books that one should cultivate one virtue after another and thus prepare for ultimate realization. But for those who follow the Jnana Marga, path of knowledge, self-inquiry is quite enough for acquiring all the divine qualities. They need not do anything else. Please tell me how I am to realize the self. Am I to make an incantation of who am I? No, it is not intended to be an incantation. Self-inquiry is a different method from the meditation I am Shiva or I am he. I rather lay stress on self-knowledge, because you are first concerned with yourself before you proceed to know the world and its Lord. The I am he or I am Brahman meditation is more or less mental, but the quest for the self of which I speak is a direct method and is superior to the other. For as soon as you undertake the quest and begin to go deeper and deeper, the real self is waiting there to receive you, and then whatever is done by something else, and you have no hand in it. In this process, all doubts are automatically given up, just as one who sleeps forgets all his cares for the time being. Although the scriptures proclaim, "Thou art that," it is only a sign of weakness to meditate, "I am that," not this, because you are eternally that. What has to be done is to investigate what one really is and remain that. I have been directed by Sri Sankaracharya of Kamakoti Pita from Jalisvar near Puri, Jagannath. I practice Hatha Yoga and some contemplation along the lines of I am Brahman. After a while, my brain gets heated and I become afraid of death. Who sees the blank? I know that I see it. The consciousness overlooking the blank is the self. That doesn't satisfy me. I can't realize it. The fear of death arises only after the I thought arises. Whose death do you fear? To whom does the fear come? So long as there is identification of the self with the body, there will be fear. But I am not aware of my body. Who says that he is not aware? I don't understand. What is your method of meditation? I am Brahman. I am Brahman is only a thought. Who says it? Brahman himself does not say so. What need is there for him to say it? Nor can the real I say so, for I always abides as Brahman. So it is only a thought. Whose thought is it? All thoughts come from the unreal I. That is the I thought. Remain without thinking. So long as there is thought, there will be fear. When I go on thinking on this line, forgetfulness ensues. The brain becomes heated and I become afraid. Yes, the mind is concentrated in the brain and hence you get a hot sensation there. That is because of the I thought. So long as there is thought, there will be forgetfulness. There is the thought, I am Brahman. Then forgetfulness supervenes. Then the I thought arises and simultaneously the fear of death also. Forgetfulness and thought exist only for the I thought. Investigate this and it will disappear like a phantom. What remains then is the real I. That is the self. The thought I am Brahman may be an aid to concentration insofar as it keeps other thoughts away and persists alone. But then you have to ask, whose thought is it? It will be found to come from the I. But where does the I thought come from? Probe into it and it will vanish. The Supreme Self will shine forth of itself. No further effort is needed. When the one real I remains alone, it will not need to say, I am Brahman. Does a man go on repeating, I am a man, unless he is challenged why he should declare himself a man? Does anyone mistake himself for an animal that he should say, no, I am not an animal, I am a man? Similarly, since Brahman or I alone is, there is no one to challenge it, and there is no need to repeat, I am Brahman. Is a set meditation necessary for strengthening the mind? Not if you keep the idea always before you that it is not your work. At first, effort is needed to remind yourself of it, but later on it becomes natural and continuous. The work will go on of its own accord, and your peace will remain undisturbed. Meditation is your true nature. You call it meditation now, because there are other thoughts distracting you. When these thoughts are dispelled, you remain alone. That is, in the state of meditation, free from thoughts. And that is your real nature, which you are now trying to realize by keeping away other thoughts. Such keeping away of other thoughts is now called meditation. But when the practice becomes firm, your real nature shows itself as true meditation. May I be assured that there is nothing further to be learnt, so far as the technique of spiritual practice is concerned, than what is written in Bhagavan's books? I ask because in all other systems, the Guru holds back some secret technique to reveal to his disciples at the time of initiation. There is nothing more to be known than what you find in the books. No secret technique. It is all an open secret in this system.